Stocks our strategists feel are poised to deliver positive returns are featured now in their top stock picks of the week.
Welcome to this week's Top Stock Picks. I'm Kevin Cook, and I've got a cybersecurity stock that I love, CyberArk, which I'm going to cover first. And then I'm going to have a robotics company where I want to give you a deep dive on what's going on in that explosive industry. All right, lots of reasons I want to talk to you about CyberArk, not just because they're a Zacks number one rank, but because they are. My colleague Andrew Rocco on June 3rd last week, he did his Bull of the Day article, and he highlighted, cyber is a leader in privileged access management. So this is about identity security. Who has access to your most important data and platforms? And he points out strong revenue growth. We're going to take a look at that, and a clean balance sheet with no debt. This is an Israeli company. They have offices, I believe, in New York, but it was founded and the main headquarters is still in Israel. And these guys know cybersecurity. So this article by Andrew is good because it highlights, he gives you basically a good fundamental overview. So if you're looking, you want to pay attention to that. Nice chart here of sales history and estimates on a steep 45 at least there. And with all the hacks going on, this is what I really want to emphasize, is that the big deal right now in the Bitcoin community is, when will quantum computing become good enough to crack the encryption of Bitcoin? So they're all worried about it. It's a big debate. They're forming committees. They're studying it. But long before that happens, and that could be 10 years away, right now, a company like CyberArk has to deal with the AI threat actors, right? And they have to use AI to battle AI. So this war is already being fought right now in 2025 in big ways. And so I say you have to own at least one or two cybersecurity companies. And I'll compare CyberArk to another big player that you'll know the name of in a moment. But these guys are on the bleeding edge of where the hackers are going. And the hackers are not, some guy in his mom's basement these days. These are nation state enterprises doing the hacking. I just watched the movie The Beekeeper with Jason Statham, and that was the whole theme of that. The bad guys in that were very sophisticated cyber hackers, and they weren't in North Korea and they weren't in Russia. They were actually in the US. So that's because it's a big business. And I've been writing about this for 2 years. What a big business, ransomware, et cetera, and hacking is. So, and if they're able to automate it with AI, then this makes companies like CyberArk and others must own to be able to deal with it. So take a look at Andrew's article from June 3rd. Andrew is a good technical analyst, so he likes to look for the chart pattern. He points out a possible cup and handle there. Let's go to the price chart, because I want to tell you what we've done with CyberArk. This is not a new play for us. We bought it last October around $275, and we rode it all the way up to $420. Did I sell? No, I didn't. I wasn't predicting the February market peak and everything that would come with it, with the impending trade war. But we actually decided to capture some profits. I think on Monday, February 24th, we ended up pulling 30% out of it, which was fine with me. The key is, when do you get back in? And I was ready. So during the April tariff war meltdown, we bought near the lows. We bought $295 again in cyber in mid-April. Very happy with that trade on that big plunge Monday, April 7th. And we're still holding. I'm looking for new highs here. I actually only own one cybersecurity stock right now, because I didn't catch the swings in a couple others I was looking at. So I'm sticking with cyber. And, because they're in the middle of this very sophisticated threat war where nation states are playing for big money and state secrets too. So speaking of state secrets, let's talk about who is CyberArk's big competition. Well, of course, it's CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike, specializes in dealing with nation state threat actors. So I want to compare them on a valuation basis because I think that this makes the case for owning cyber. So we're on the detailed estimates page, or actually I'll have to go to that. Zach's number one rank, as you can see there for cyber. If we scroll down, so let's just concentrate here, top far right, on revenue growth. So they're approaching 1.5 billion in revenue, which, I mean, this year, if they do 1.3, that's 32% growth. And the market cap is only 20 billion. So if we do a price to sales ratio, 20 billion on 1.5, that's a 13x price to sales ratio. Not cheap, but this is unique tech, right? And so you want to see that growth, right? And they're still already projecting 20% growth for next year, which is really nice to see. Now, I'll just tell you the same CrowdStrike numbers. Actually, I'll go ahead and put them in. But so right here on the detailed estimates page, I can just pop in my next symbol, Crowd, and go to the same data for Crowd. So Crowd, we're talking 115 billion market cap. So let's call this midpoint 5.5 billion. They're going to crack soon, growing at 21%, modest growth. Hey, it's not 32%, but it's nothing to sneeze at. But that price to sales valuation, 115 market cap on 5.5 billion, that's 21 times you're paying, 21 times sales. So I like owning cyber here at only 13 times sales. And profit wise, look at CrowdStrike is having a rough year because they had that big meltdown where they had some bad code in Microsoft Azure, and it took down all their corporate clients like airlines and banks for a while. So they took a charge for that. They're no positive EPS growth this year, and meanwhile, cyber is growing at like 25%. And the PE is better. So the PEs are awfully rich. Crowd's trading at like 130 times earnings. And I believe cyber comes in just over 100. So all in all, that's why I love owning cyber here and always looking for the next opportunity to pick up another good cybersecurity stock. All right, let's shift gears now to my second pick, which is partly a robotics company. And that is the Swiss industrial giant ABB. The stock symbol is ABBNY. So I wrote this bull of the day last week about ABB because I'm studying the robotics companies. There are not that many that are public. So I own an ETF called BOTZ, B-O-T-Z, and the biggest holding in there is NVIDIA, and then ABB. So I thought, well, I've got to learn more about ABB. It's a fascinating company. Let me just give you the bullet highlights here. Swiss pioneer in robotics will spin off that thriving division next year. This is why I want you to look at it. I don't want you to run out and buy ABB. What I want you to do is use it as a flag on the mountain of studying robotics and for what's about to unfold over the next 6 to 18 months. ABB has a 140-year history going back to the early days of electricity innovation in Europe. It was actually, they joined forces with a Swedish company in 1988 and adopted the name ABB. And I was surprised to see how many, the size of the U.S. footprint, over 18,000 employees across 40 facilities from the northeast to the southeast, Midwest, and even Texas and New Mexico. So if you find this bull today on ABB, you'll find a lot of good stuff where I talk about the robotics revolution. And the reason I'm watching this so closely is because when ABB decides to spin this off, they still got to get it approved by their board. Let's say they spin out the robotics unit in the second half of 26. It'll be watched by the entire robotics industry because there are so many private robotics companies all looking to IPO. Well, they're not all looking to IPO. I should say that they would be so lucky if they could have the success and the venture capital funding and growing revenues to get to a point where they could even talk about or think about IPOing. But there's so many of them out there. I talk about Jensen Huang's partnership with robotics companies, or actually he's providing the tool sets and platforms for robotics companies to do simulation training and synthetic data using Omniverse and Cosmos. There are 36 private robotic companies that want to work with NVIDIA platforms. So that's how many are out there, all vying for funding and success. Let's see if there's anything else good in there. So I've got some quotes in here from, I wonder if I put the quotes in here. Yeah, from Mark Andreessen, talking about how big the robotics industry is going to be. This is a quote from him right here, and this is very recently. He said it's going to be the biggest industry in the history of the planet. So while we're talking about artificial intelligence and driverless cars and AGI, the sense,
hi, I'm Kevin. And this
industrial investors is that robotics is going to be
I got an email that
the next multi-trillion-dollar industry. We've heard Jensen say it. Now Mark Andreessen saying it. So along with this, I want to show you something I started a couple of weeks ago called The Week in AI, where I review the top news in AI. And I usually make a video about it and write an article. And then I've been doing a live space on X with my colleague, Ethan Feller. But look for this article too, because this has a lot more details. And it has a link to our space, which you can watch the recorded space, or rather listen to the recorded space we did. But I recorded this on Friday, and this is about the Mary Meeker research team at Bond Capital. They dropped a 340 slide deck on the street and just talking about everything that's going on in AI. But I pull out a lot of the robotics things. Okay, so if I asked you, what are the top private robotics companies? Probably the first one that would come to mind is Tesla's Optimus, because we know that Elon Musk is going after this space, and he's probably going to end up being a winner. You know, he's already proven it with electric vehicles, possible autonomous driving, and rockets and satellites. So why wouldn't he win in robotics? But if I asked you who's the number 2 private player, you'd probably stumble a bit. And so I reveal who that is in this article. Let's see if I name the company. Well, I'll just tell you who it is. The company is called Figure Robots. And they are going to be a player, because if you read this article and find our X space, or watch the video too here, actually in the video, I introduce Brett Adcock. Brett Adcock was the guy who created Archer Aviation. So he's also very serious about winning the robotics wars.
I am,
and from anybody you talk to, whether the guy's building the robots like Elon or Brett,
I wanted to,
or the guys investing in the platforms like Mark Andreessen is an investor in Optimus, and Jensen is building the platforms. They all think it's going to be the biggest industry. It's going to be the next multi-trillion-dollar industry. And we're going to be surrounded by millions of humanoid robots. Now, it's not just humanoid robots. There's all kinds of robots you could have in a factory or in an office or other type of facility.
I got an email,
but it's a huge trend. And so that's why I profiled ABB, so I could get you to pay attention to this trend and be on the lookout for the companies that might go public. Thanks for joining me in this week's Top Stock Picks. For more free data analysis, Zacks has tons of free research covering earnings momentum and great companies that are leading the fifth industrial revolution. Check out this week's promo at zacks.com/promo, and we'll see you next week.